The courtroom smelled of old wood and stale coffee, but the air crackled with something sharper prejudice, barely veiled. Amara Ellis stood alone at the defendant's table, her hands steady despite the judge's glare boring into her. She wasn't supposed to be here, not like this, but fate had a cruel way of testing the resilient. It started with a traffic stop, a minor infraction blown out of proportion. Amara, a 38-year-old black woman, had been driving through the small town of Fairview, Alabama, on her way to a legal conference. Her rental car, a modest sedan, had a taillight flickering, hardly a crime. But Officer Daniel Hargrove, a man with a reputation for keeping order, saw her dark skin and decided she was trouble. A routine stop turned into a lecture, then a citation, then an accusation of disorderly conduct, when Amara calmly questioned his tone. Her words, measured and precise, were labeled defiant in his report. Now, she faced Judge Ronald Carver, a man known for his quick gavel and quicker temper, in a courtroom that felt more like a lion's den. Amara adjusted her plain gray blazer, bought off the rack to blend in, and scanned the room. The gallery was half full, locals, mostly white, whispering among themselves, their eyes flickering with curiosity or disdain. She caught snippets of their murmurs, uppity, should have known her place. Her heart thudded, not from fear, but from the weight of history repeating itself. She'd spent her life dismantling systems like this, but today, she was just another face in the crosshairs. Your Honor, Amara began, her voice steady but firm, I was merely asking for clarification during the stop. I wasn't disorderly. Judge Carver leaned forward, his glasses glinting under the fluorescent lights. You raised your voice, Ms. Ellis. That's disruption in my book. This court doesn't tolerate backtalk. His tone dripped with condescension, and a faint smirk tugged at his lips. The gallery murmured approval, emboldening him. Amara's jaw tightened. She wanted to fire back, to cite the law, to tear apart the flimsy charge. But she held her tongue, knowing every word would be weaponized against her. Instead, she said, I respectfully disagree, Your Honor. I was within my rights. The gavel slammed. That's enough. Carver snapped. You're fined $500 for contempt. Speak again, and it's jail time. The room buzzed, a mix of gasps and smug nods. Amara stood taller, her eyes locked on Carver's, refusing to flinch. She could feel the weight of every stare, every assumption, pressing down like a physical force. But she wasn't just Amara Ellis, the woman they saw. She was Amara Ellis, lead counsel for the National Civil Rights Coalition, a name that had toppled discriminatory laws and freed wrongfully convicted souls. She'd chosen to keep that truth hidden, wanting to see Fairview's justice system for what it was. Now, she was seeing it raw, ugly, and unapologetic. The tension in the courtroom thickened as the hearing progressed. Officer Hargrove took the stand, his chest puffed out, recounting his version of the stop with exaggerated flair. She was aggressive, Your Honor. Kept questioning my authority, refusing to comply. His words painted Amara as a threat, each syllable laced with bias. The judge nodded along, scribbling notes, his face unreadable but his bias clear. Amara's hands clenched at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She knew this script black woman speaks, black woman pays. The prosecutor, a wiry man named Paul Grayson, leaned into the narrative. Your Honor, Ms. Ellis's behavior shows a pattern of disrespect for law enforcement. We recommend community service in addition to the fine, to ensure she understands her placer, her responsibilities. The slip wasn't lost on Amara, nor on the few in the gallery who shifted uncomfortably. Grayson's eyes darted to her, expecting submission. He got none. Amara's mind raced. She could end this now, reveal her credentials, and watch the room scramble. But that would be too easy. She wanted them to dig their own graves, to expose the rot in Fairview's system before she struck. So she played along, letting the charade unfold. May I respond, Your Honor? She asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. Carver's smirk returned. Careful, Miss Ellis. You're on thin ice. He gestured for her to speak, clearly expecting her to falter. The gallery leaned forward, hungry for drama. Amara took a breath, her years of courtroom experience guiding her. Officer Hargrove's account is inconsistent with the facts. Body camera footage, if reviewed, would show I was polite and compliant. The charge of disorderly conduct stems from his discomfort with my questions, not my actions. Her words were a scalpel, precise and cutting. The gallery stirred, some nodding, others scoffing. Hargrove's face reddened, his fists clenching on the stand. Carver's smirk vanished. You're accusing an officer of lying. His voice was low, dangerous. That's a bold claim for someone with no legal representation. I represent myself, Amara said, her gaze unwavering. And I'm entitled to question the evidence. The room erupted in whispers. Carver's gavel slammed again, silencing them. You're out of line, he growled. Another word, and you're in cuffs. He turned to Grayson. Proceed with your recommendation. Grayson, emboldened, pushed for more. Given her attitude, Your Honor, we suggest 30 days in county jail to deter further defiance. The gallery gasped, the air growing heavier. Amara's pulse quickened, not from fear but from the audacity of it all. They were escalating, doubling down on their bias, unaware of the storm they were inviting. She glanced at the gallery, spotting a young black woman in the back, her eyes wide with fear and recognition. Amara gave her a subtle nod, a silent promise, this isn't over. The woman clutched a notebook, her hands trembling. Amara knew her Lila Carter, a local activist who'd reached out to her months ago about Fairview's systemic issues. Lila didn't know Amara was here undercover, but she'd soon understand. The hearing took a darker turn. Carver, now visibly agitated, began questioning Amara directly. Where are you from, Ms. Ellis? You don't sound like you're from around here. The implication was clear: outsider, troublemaker. I'm from Chicago, Amara said evenly. I was passing through. Chicago, huh? Carver sneered. Big city, big attitude. Maybe that's why you think you can talk back to officers. The gallery chuckled, feeding his ego. Amara's stomach churned, not from his words but from the ease with which he wielded his power. She'd seen judges like him before, petty tyrants hiding behind robes. The questioning grew more invasive. Carver probed her job, her background, her reasons for being in Fairview. Each question was a trap, designed to paint her as an agitator. Amara answered sparingly, her responses clipped but polite, walking a tightrope between defiance and compliance. Every word was a calculated risk, drawing out the judge's bias for the record. She knew the court stenographer was typing every syllable, and she'd use it later. Hargrove, back on the stand, doubled down. She's one of those activist types, Your Honor. Probably came here to stir up trouble. The accusation was a spark, igniting the gallery's murmurs into a roar. Amara's eyes flicked to Lila, who was now scribbling furiously, her face a mix of anger and hope. That's enough speculation, Amara interjected, her voice cutting through the noise. There's no evidence to support that claim. Carver's face darkened. I warned you, Ms. Ellis. You're in contempt again. Bailiff, prepare to detain her. The bailiff, a burly man with a blank expression, stepped forward. The gallery held its breath, the tension now a living thing, coiling around the room. Amara stood her ground, her heart pounding but her resolve unbreakable. She'd planned for this moment, anticipated the escalation. In her bag, tucked beneath the table, was a folder with her credentials, her law degree, her case history, her name and headlines for dismantling corrupt systems. She'd reveal it soon, but not yet. She wanted Carver to overplay his hand, to expose the depth of his prejudice before she turned the tables. The bailiff approached, cuffs in hand. Lila stood up in the gallery, her voice trembling but clear. This isn't right. She's being targeted. The room froze, all eyes on her. Carver's gavel slammed, but Lila kept going. You're punishing her for being black and speaking up. Order. Carver roared. Sit down, or you're next. Lila sat, but her outburst had shifted the room's energy. A few onlookers looked uneasy, their whispers now questioning. Amara caught Lila's eye, giving her another nod. Hold on, it said. Justice is coming. Grayson, sensing the shift, pushed harder. Your Honor, this disruption proves our point. Ms. Ellis and her supporters are a danger to our community's order. The word supporters was a jab, implying Amara was rallying a mob. It was a lie, but it landed with the judge. Carver leaned back, his eyes narrowing. Ms. Ellis, you've caused enough trouble. I'm sentencing you to 30 days in jail, effective immediately, plus a $1,000 fine. Maybe that'll teach you some respect. The gavel fell, and the room exploded in chaos, gasps, cheers, and protests colliding. Amara's heart raced, not from fear but from the clarity of the moment. They'd gone too far, shown their hand. Now, it was her turn. She reached for her bag, her movements deliberate. Your Honor, she said, her voice cutting through the din, before you finalize that sentence, I have something to present. Carver's eyes narrowed, but he waved a hand. Make it quick. Amara opened the folder, pulling out a single sheet of paper. She held it up, her hand steady despite the room's weight. My name is Amara Ellis, lead counsel for the National Civil Rights Coalition. I've argued before the Supreme Court, overturned 17 wrongful convictions, and exposed systemic bias in 6 states. This court's actions today will be my next case. The room fell silent, the air sucked out by her words. Carver's face paled, his gavel frozen mid-air. Hargrove's jaw dropped, and Grayson fumbled his notes. Lila's eyes widened, a smile breaking through her fear. The gallery erupted in whispers, now a mix of shock and awe. Amara continued, her voice rising with quiet power. I came to Fairview to observe your justice system, and I've seen enough. Officer Hargrove's false report, your biased ruling, and this court's disregard for due process will be challenged. I'm filing a federal complaint tomorrow. Carver stammered, his authority crumbling. You didn't disclose this earlier. I didn't have to, Amara said, her eyes blazing. The law doesn't require me to wear my credentials on my sleeve. But it does require you to uphold justice, and you failed. The bailiff stepped back, uncertain. The gallery was a storm of voices now, some cheering, others shouting in disbelief. Lila stood again, clapping, her notebook raised like a flag. Amara's folder held more body camera footage requests, witness statements, and a draft complaint already prepared. She'd been ready for this, had walked into Fairview knowing the odds. Carver banged his gavel, desperate to regain control. This changes nothing. You're still in contempt. But his voice lacked conviction, drowned by the room's chaos. Amara smiled, a quiet, unshakable thing. We'll see about that, Your Honor. She turned to the gallery, meeting Lila's eyes, then the others, those who doubted, those who'd hoped. This wasn't just her fight, it was theirs. And it was only beginning. The courtroom's chaos didn't subside, it grew, a living pulse of shock and reckoning. Amara Ellis stood at the defendant's table, her folder open, papers fanned out like a battle map. Judge Carver's face was a mask of disbelief, his knuckles white around the gavel. Officer Hargrove shifted on the stand, his earlier bravado replaced by a nervous tick in his jaw. Prosecutor Grayson scrambled to gather his notes, his confidence unraveling. The gallery was a storm. Some locals whispered in outrage, others in awe, while Lila Carter's applause echoed like a beacon. Amara's revelation had cracked the room open, exposing the fault lines of Fairview's justice system. She didn't flinch under the weight of their stares. Her voice, steady and resonant, filled the space. Your Honor, this court has operated on assumptions about me from the moment I walked in. Assumptions about my character, my intent, my worth, all based on my appearance. She paused, letting the words sink in. Those assumptions aren't just wrong, they're illegal. And I intend to prove it. Carver's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. He'd underestimated her, assumed she was powerless, and now his authority hung by a thread. This is highly irregular, he stammered. You should have disclosed your profession earlier. This smells like entrapment. Amara's eyes narrowed, but her tone remained calm, cutting deeper for it. Entrapment would imply I provoked this. I didn't. Officer Hargrove escalated a routine stop. You escalated this hearing. I simply spoke the truth, and you punished me for it. That's not entrapment, that's bias. The gallery erupted again, voices clashing. A white man in a flannel shirt stood, shouting, "She's playing the race card." But Lila shot back, "She's exposing the truth." The bailiff moved toward Lila, but Amara raised a hand, her presence commanding enough to halt him. Let's be clear, Amara continued, addressing the room. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's walked into this courtroom and faced judgment before justice. It's about the pattern of harassment in Fairview, documented by activists like Lila Carter. She nodded toward Lila, whose eyes gleamed with pride. It's about a system that fines people for speaking, for existing, for being who they are. Carver banged his gavel, his face reddening. Enough. This is my courtroom, Ms. Ellis. You don't get to lecture me. But his voice trembled, betraying his panic. The stenographer's fingers flew across her machine, capturing every word. Amara knew those transcripts would be her weapon in the days to come. She turned to the gallery, her gaze sweeping over the faces, some hostile, some curious, a few nodding in quiet support. I'm not here to lecture, she said. I'm here to hold this system accountable. Officer Hargrove's body camera footage will show the truth of that traffic stop. My complaint will show the truth of this hearing. And the people of Fairview will decide what kind of justice they want. Grayson, desperate to regain control, stood. Your Honor, this is a stunt. She's grandstanding to undermine the court's authority. I move to dismiss her statements as irrelevant. Amara didn't miss a beat. Irrelevant? The law says otherwise. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination in any program receiving federal funds, including this court. Your actions, Mr. Grayson, and yours, Your Honor, are now evidence in my case. The room stilled, her words landing like a thunderclap. Carver's eyes darted to the clock, then to the bailiff, as if searching for an escape. Hargrove slumped in his seat, his earlier swagger gone. The gallery was a mix of stunned silence and restless energy, the weight of Amara's truth settling in. She pressed on, her voice rising with purpose. I've spent 15 years fighting cases like this. I've seen judges step down, officers retrained, systems rebuilt. Fairview isn't unique, but it's not untouchable either. Change starts when people see the truth and demand better. Lila stood again, her voice ringing out. She's right. We've been saying this for years. Fairview's system targets black people, poor people, anyone who doesn't fit their mold. A few others in the gallery clapped, their support growing bolder. The man in flannel scoffed, but even he stayed silent, sensing the tide shifting. Carver's gavel slammed again, weaker this time. Order. Ms. Ellis, you're out of line. Bailiff, escort her out. But the bailiff hesitated, glancing at Amara, then at the gallery. The room was no longer Carver's. Amara's presence had turned it into something bigger, a stage for justice, not just judgment. She gathered her papers, her movements deliberate. I'll leave, Your Honor, but this isn't over. My team will be in touch with the federal court by morning. And the press, they'll love this story. She glanced at Lila, who was already texting, no doubt alerting local activists and journalists. Amara had planned for this, had contacts ready to amplify the case. Fairview's secrets wouldn't stay buried long. As the bailiff approached, Amara held up a hand. "No need. I'll walk out myself." She turned to the gallery, her voice soft but piercing. "This isn't just my fight. It's yours too. Speak up. Demand better. The truth doesn't hide forever." She walked out, head high, the folder tucked under her arm. The gallery buzzed behind her, voices rising in debate. Lila followed, catching up in the hallway. "Ms. Ellis, I didn't know it was you," she whispered, her eyes wide. "You're the one who took down that DA in Atlanta, aren't you?" Amara smiled faintly. "I'm just Amara today. But yes, that was me. And we're not done yet." She handed Lila a card with her contact information. "Get that footage request filed. We'll need it." The next morning, Fairview woke to chaos. Amara's team had worked overnight, filing a federal complaint against Carver, Hargrove, and the county for civil rights violations. Local news outlets, tipped off by Lila, ran headlines, "Civil rights attorney targeted in Fairview courtroom." Social media exploded, with "Justice for Amara" trending by noon. The body camera footage, released after Amara's team pressured the police department, showed the truth, a calm, polite exchange twisted into a false narrative by Hargrove's report. Carver faced immediate scrutiny. His past rulings, many tinged with bias, were dug up by reporters. The state judicial board launched an investigation, and whispers of his resignation began to circulate. Hargrove was suspended pending review, his career teetering. Grayson, humiliated, withdrew from the case, citing personal reasons. The courtroom stenographer, a quiet ally, leaked the transcript to a local paper, cementing the public's outrage. Amara didn't stop there. She returned to Fairview a week later, this time with her full team lawyers, activists, and a documentary crew capturing the town's reckoning. She met with Lila and other locals, building a coalition to monitor the courts and police. They held a town hall, packed with residents, black and white, who shared stories of similar injustices. The man in flannel from the courtroom attended, his face grim but attentive. He didn't speak, but he listened. A small victory. At the town hall, Amara took the stage, her gray blazer replaced by a sharp navy suit, her true self unmasked. "This isn't about revenge," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years spent fighting. "It's about accountability. Fairview can be better, but only if you demand it. Hold your leaders to the truth. Hold yourselves to it too." The crowd cheered, though some sat in uneasy silence, grappling with their complicity. Amara's words weren't just a call to action, they were a mirror, forcing Fairview to see itself clearly. Lila, now a lead organizer, announced plans for a voter drive to elect officials who'd reform the system. The documentary crew captured it all, their footage later winning awards for exposing small-town injustice. Months later, Carver resigned, his reputation in tatters. Hargrove was fired after the footage disproved his claims, and he faced a civil lawsuit from Amara's team. The county settled out of court, funding a community oversight board to monitor police and judicial conduct. Amara's case became a national example, cited in law schools and activist circles. Fairview, once a quiet town, became a symbol of change, imperfect, but trying. Amara returned to Chicago, her mission ongoing. She framed Lila's thank you note, a simple card that read, "You gave us hope." It sat on her desk, a reminder of why she fought. Fairview wasn't perfect, but it was proof that truth, wielded with courage, could shift the ground beneath even the most stubborn systems. The story of Amara Ellis spread, sparking debates across the country. Was justice served, or was it just a start? Share your thoughts. What does fairness mean to you, and how do we heal a divided community?